All right, let's do this, Cliff. Hello, everybody. Welcome
Hello,
to Torn
everybody.
Tuesday.
Wait, are we live?
We're
I need to turn
live.
on the lamp. We're live. Are we live? Hello, everybody.
He's got a lamp
I'm
to turn on.
going to turn on the lamp. There's people walking behind you picking up boxes and stuff.
That's right. Oh, maybe I should turn. Oh, you guys are seeing too much. You guys are seeing too much. Where's my background? Hey, where's my dwarves? Where's my dwarves at? Where's my dwarves at?
I'm going to
There they
turn the lamp
are.
on. Oh, there you go. There's
See,
your
this
dwarves.
feels a little warmer, doesn't this? This feels
That's
nice.
funny. So this is how we do. This is how we do our show, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the backwoods of the internet, where we're trying to barely put things back together. Um, it's I don't know. This is funny. Oh, there's light. Oh, that's beautiful. I've got much better light in the room now. And hello, everybody.
So, Cliff,
Hi, everybody.
Torn Tuesday's been going on for 7 or 8 years. We're hundreds of episodes in. We're doing, this is your weekly dose of
Yes,
all things Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, and there's more and more to talk about. And as we ramp up everything,
much more to talk about. Can I say welcome to the destination that you thought that you were at? And yes, this is where you want to be. It is theonering.net. This is our weekly live stream that is our live programming in correlation with the website and the fan community, the community that's been around for over 20 years now as an all volunteer website, the ultimate fan destination to share your thoughts and to contend, if you want to. You can come and share your thoughts and encounter friendly debate, intellectual discussion, and we can contend with some of the more interesting things that are going on in the world of fandom right now, not the least of which is the announcement of the 4K ultra high definition release of the Middle-earth films from Peter Jackson, including the Hobbit trilogy and the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. And even more so than that, we've had a great deal of conversation that has hit the airwaves about nudity and sexualized characters in the upcoming Amazon Studios TV series, which is currently in production. Boy, there's been a lot going on. And boy, here we are. Welcome, everybody. I want to say my name. My name is Clifford Broadway. I'm a writer and writer-producer of Ringers, Lord of the Fans, the documentary. We just got an interesting write-up in The New Yorker. We've been mentioned in a lot of other newspapers recently around the world and around the web, and everybody's talking about this big subject. And I'm very pleased to hear, I'm hearing from fans. Do you know, Justin? I have been getting wonderful, intelligent responses from people around the world saying, look, here's a blog post that I made with these, beautifully thought out and well-researched ideas about Professor Tolkien and his approach to high fantasy and what he was trying to do with his idiomatic expression in his novels. It's a fascinating conversation, and I'm so glad to be sharing this with everybody here today. Welcome to the show. If you're with us, you're live on Twitter, Periscope, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. We are live. Welcome to the world of the living, my friends. And we're going to talk with you. I can see you chatting with us live in the YouTube chat, and Justin can see a lot of other people scrolling through. It's fantastic to be here. Welcome again, everybody. I appreciate it. I really do. Oh, you fixed your sound.
I wanted to start off the show. We've got a lot to talk about, Cliff,
We
about
do.
those topics and updates from the set. But I think we should get this out of the way. Is a recognition that the internet has changed, the world has changed.
Yes.
As Galadriel speaks the first words in The Lord of the Rings, the first words we ever hear is the world has changed. The world has changed, and the One Ring's been around
Yes.
since 1999. We've been doing this for 20 years. We're still doing it. We have a blog, we have a website, a message board, a chat room, an IRC chat, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Periscope. Instagram. We're on everything. We've adapted. There's different volunteers that like rose to the occasion, and are managing
Hmm.
have done a great job managing the message boards. We've got another volunteer that raised his hand to say, I spend so much money on collectibles that I can post about collectibles, and now we have a
Hmm.
collectibles editor. The Happy Hobbits raised their hand and said, we live on a farm and let's make some videos. So, I think
About home cooking and how to handle rustic life, because that's what Professor Tolkien wrote about. That was so charming as an entryway into the rustic life of Middle English people, and they became hobbits. And it's very funny. It was very private amusement for Tolkien to take those, rustic people in the Midlands of England and put them outside in the rain on uncomfortable, really uncomfortable adventures. And he thought that was hilarious. That's how it all started. So yeah, we've had a lot of different energy from different supporting staff doing all these different tasks for us. Justin, we even have somebody who helps us do public engagements and conventions. Somebody on the East Coast who does the same thing, helping us do arrangements for the cons and all the fan events. And so we all apply ourselves in different quadrants of this massive community that we've all put together, all volunteer all the time.
but it's not just we don't represent fandom in totality. We are just one
Hmm.
part. The
Exactly, just
Tolkien
one
Forever
part, just
group
one
has always
opening.
been a part of Los Angeles. The Tolkien Forever group,
Yes.
it has brought together fans for dozens of years. There's the Tolkien Mensa group. Cliff, you've emceed and held talks at several Tolkien events put on by our friends at the Tolkien Society over in Europe and everything. What I'm saying is,
Mm.
we don't own fandom. We are just a voice among many. And as people in the chat room are
And
saying,
we're just an opening, a portal for people to share even more voices. Really.
and Leia Peterson in the chat room says that she just discovered the Prancing Pony podcast. It's fantastic. I
Oh, they're
recommend
great.
looking out
Yes.
the. And not
Yeah,
only
they're
that,
great.
the Tolkien Professor used to live stream a lot on Twitch. A Tolkien Professor has been doing live read-alongs.
Mm.
Stephen Colbert, you can count him as a viewer and a fan of the Tolkien Professor. So
Yes.
what I'm saying is, the power of our fandom is in the many voices.
Indeed. There's some wonderful YouTube creators out there who are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people with a Patreon, volunteer Patreon supported community like History of Middle Earth YouTube series and Men of the West and all these other people who have these extraordinary voices online. And we're all part of this community together, and we all acknowledge that together, really. Now, yes. So, hi, Justin. How you doing? Hello,
So,
everybody. See you.
I just wanted to preface that to say, Tolkien fandom is 80 years young. It wasn't invented with the movies, and it wasn't invented
Yes.
with the online. But we have to acknowledge that in the year 2020, fandom is morphing again, and the communication style of fandom is morphing again. And I think over the last 5 years, we've seen other fan groups deal with new technology, new
Mm,
social things, and
mm.
some of them have done really well, and some of them have done really poorly. I think and Cliff, you and I have talked about this for the last 3 years. Is that our efforts at the OneRing.net have always been to bring fans together, whether it's in person at conventions in Griffith
Yes.
Park, Oscar
Yes.
parties, online chat rooms, message boards, weekly book clubs, whatever. We're about bringing people together, and uh, there has been many efforts to divide fandom over the last 5 years, most notably in Star Wars, right? Where every single thing in Star Wars was debated ad nauseum on YouTube videos and algorithm YouTube videos that are 10 minutes long about Mary Sue characters and whatever. It got really gross in Star Wars fandom. And Cliff, we recognize that when Amazon acquired this, it says the work ahead of us as fans and as a fan site is to maintain the collective positivity, not the collective group, and not divide fandom.
There's no reason for any of us to be divisive. Now, what happened to the Star Wars fandom was divisive because of corporate decisions that were made handling the intellectual property. And you've got some really good and some really, really bad. Everybody loves The Mandalorian, and they want nothing but more of that. Well, people have a lot of complaints about the sequel trilogy, especially The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. So everybody has an opinion, yes, everybody has an opinion. However, there's a temperament and there's a certain creative mental flexibility that we as a fandom have been able to show over many, many decades. Do you know how much disagreement there was about the way that Rankin and Bass did a 96-minute animated film for The Hobbit? There was so much disagreement because it did not represent Tolkien to some people, and yet to a lot of other people, even though Beorn was gone, and even though there was an incredible truncation of the story, they won the Peabody Award. They won the Peabody Award for The Hobbit in 1977. So there was a split even further when Ralph Bakshi made his adaptation. Of course, there were a lot of people who were very aggravated that the entire story was never told. And that wasn't Ralph Bakshi's fault. That was United Artists' fault. The studio pulled a fast one on him, and they didn't even tell him the truth. And then Peter Jackson comes along in the year 1999, and there was just, there was enough room for the contention and the discussion of, is this really good? Is this really what we want as an adaptation of Tolkien? Is this a valuable thing to us to add this to the world of Tolkien? And beyond all of those discussions, the fandom has been very holistic and has been very egalitarian, which is why I used that particular word trying to talk about this conversation in my article, Sex and Sensibility. I want to have a very open hand and a very egalitarian conversation because that is in the spirit of what we are as fans. We may have had our disagreements in the past, but it didn't hurt the fandom and it didn't polarize us because we realized there's enough room for more interesting voices and more interesting approaches.
Again,
now, given that there's enough room for people, and our strength is to let everybody have that creative room to talk about it, and we can always feel good about the fact that we're supporting one another. We are supporting one another in our support of loving Tolkien, and we support going back to the books and our original love of J.R.R. Tolkien, no matter what. It always comes back to that. So there's been no weird polarization that has, punctured our fandom and made it so difficult for us to, grow over the years.
And Cliff, and we've reinforced that both just as a community and in commerce. Let's be clear that the book that you have credit on, The People's Guide to J.R.R. Tolkien, is not just written by Cliff Broadway. It has a bunch of authors. And when you produced Ringer's Lord of the Fans, the award-winning documentary, it doesn't just follow one fan's journey through Tolkien. It is about all different fandoms and how it bled into politics in the 70s and how it was counterculture and then it was right-wing culture, and we've swung from the counterculture of the hippie days of Tolkien fandom all the way to Palantir Technologies going public on the stock exchange now. It's like there's room in fandom for all these voices.
Indeed, but the interesting thing is examining popular culture. My approach with the director Carlene Cordova in the Ringers documentary was taking a look at how popular culture has embraced Tolkien. I mean, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a Gandalf modem. Way before there was the Palantir technology, which is too much for me to deal with right now. But there was a Gandalf modem, and there was a Frodo Lives virus, a little IBM, you know, a disk operating system computer virus that would launch itself on September 22nd every year. It was kind of harmless, but it could mess up your computer back then, you know. So there's all kinds of things in
But
fandom.
yeah,
there's all kinds of voices in fandom.
So there's always been our strength. Tolkien fandom's strength is in the variety of voices. And Cliff, you said something earlier that Star Wars made some decisions at the top that tore a fandom. I don't think that's totally accurate. Scuba Steve in the chat room says Star Wars fandom ripped itself apart. And I agree with that statement. Star Wars fandom ripped itself apart, and I think part of, I don't just think, there are tons of articles. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, there is tons of scholarship around how the divisiveness of the political conversation also led into the divisiveness of pop culture conversation. And there's a dotted line between the very, very divisive language that we're seeing politically from 2016 on, and the divisiveness of Star Wars fandom from 2016 on, and how every new character, whether it was a woman, person of color, this, that, decisions, creative decisions, whatever, the story is just a retread, but it just, everything turned toxic in Star Wars. And what I want to reinforce is that our job as fans, and as the fans say, and as a 20-year voice, is to engage in that discussion. But we have to make every effort to not let it get toxic and not let fandom destroy itself. And I think that's job number one. Reporting on every rumor and thing is our job, was our job, and has been our job. And still, that is the fun part.
Every little rumor, every little thing that comes our way, that is our job. And I hope that doesn't upset Jennifer Hutchinson or any of the other lead writers over there working with Patrick McKay and Brian Cogman and all
hi guys, I know you're watching. I know you watch this. Hi Brian.
But hi guys. You know, you're welcome to come on the show because we've wanted to have a dialogue with you for a long, long time.
The dialogue is everything. This goes back to Cliff. This goes back to what did New Line do right that other studios did wrong, especially Bad Robot, and that is New Line engaged with the fans. And no, we did not talk up to Peter Jackson while he was making the films. No, but you know what? We had a dialogue with New Line Cinema. You know, when Guillermo del Toro was hired for The Hobbit, he showed up on our message boards and say, "Hey guys, I'm directing The Hobbit. I know you guys may not trust me, but let's start this dialogue." And for 3 years, Amazon has refused that dialogue with any fans, and I think that's part of the frustration. But Cliff, I just want to call out, and then we can move on from this. But
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I just want to say that your article on Sex and Sensibility and Tolkien fandom, and the historical perspective of Tolkien, I think there's more to say on the topic. I think we have other writers, great writers, other voices that will be posting.
I'm very glad that we do. We're going to have more people posting their opinions who are going to have some counterpoints, because not everybody at the OneRing.net is in agreement with me.
I don't agree with you.
I know you don't, and you know what? I'm not the only person who's standing there with the only voice. On our website, we're going to feature some writings from other people on our staff and from people who are guest article writers, because we would like a whole broad perspective in this conversation. And most of all, Justin, I'm so glad that you mentioned it. Since they are watching, let me invite them all again. You know, J.D. Payne, Patrick McKay, Brian Cogman, Jennifer Hutchison, and everybody else at Amazon. And of course, especially, Mr. Jeff Bezos, you're a little bit too busy playing with robot arms in labs and stuff like that. But I would also like to take a big shout out to Lindsay. Hello, Lindsay Weber. You're invited to come and talk with us too. We would like to have this conversation looking back at Peter Jackson's films. He had a guy working for him named Gordon Pattison. Remember Gordon Pattison? And his job was to manage working with the fandom because there's such a huge presence in this process. And it looks like somebody is on payroll at Amazon Studios doing the same job, but they haven't reached out to us in 3 years. They have not reached out to us. So instead of us living in a vacuum, and like I noticed on Twitter, the official Twitter account of the OneRing.net just posted something very interesting in response to Jennifer Hutchinson. Imagine that. And it was posted to say, look, instead of just making tweets about it, why don't you enter into a dialogue with us? Because if you don't, then all of us common folk are just left to scrabble in the dark with rumors, and we're going to go with what information we can get.
The void will be filled, and
the void will be filled. Yes.
And I know you're watching Trailer Park. I know you're working on Lord of the Rings. I know you're working on Wheel of Time, but I know you're working on Lord of the Rings Trailer Park. Come on, if you're doing the marketing for this, do right for it. But so rounding out this. I think our number one thing is reporting on every morsel of info that we can get out of this show, as we always have for 20 years. That led to some great scholarship in our Green Book section, which is newly republished in our library on the OneRing.net, which we just relaunched. Which some of those articles were so good that they were published in book form in bookstores. The People's Guide to J.R.R. Tolkien, which is now officially in the Tolkien library. Thank you, Cliff, and thank you to all of our contributors. But I will say this. Fandom has changed in the wake of Star Wars. And there are voices, there are people and accounts from all over the world. You know which countries I'm talking about. There are people all over the world that want to divide, and they want to take all of the divisiveness that they used on Star Wars, and they want to do that to Lord of the Rings, and they're trying it now. And what we saw this week, Cliff, is someone has taken your article that is well researched and well respected voice, and they've turned it into a 10-minute YouTube video that has over 100,000 views already.
Yes.
That is just hate-filled scribe of just, Amazon is raping Tolkien, and just abusive language, divisive language, talking on race and culture and sex and religion and all the things you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table. And that's not our job. Is not to engage in that. Our job is to embrace dialogue and have different viewpoints, as we've always had.
Yes,
but
and have different
not to be
viewpoints
divisive about it.
Yeah, not divisive at all. The idea is for us to hear people tell us what they love most about J.R.R. Tolkien, because when you spend $1 billion on making a new massive franchise thing out of it, you are taking on the stewardship of that. You are not just making a TV show. You are taking on the stewardship of how Professor Tolkien is digested and absorbed by popular culture for a very long time to come. So it's not reactionary to say, we've got no relationship with the studio. They're not reaching out to us. They're not telling us anything. So we have our own conjecture and rumor, and it will allow us to we'll take the initiative. We will take the initiative and open our own dialogue.
Cliff, I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to get your honest opinion right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're kind of on the receiving end of it right now, but you've written a great article. Well-researched people in the chat room are saying that Cliff's article was not hateful at all. It was very well written and educated, and universal praise. Even if people don't agree with your conclusion and your desires for this show,
and that's fair.
No
that's
one
totally
can
fair.
fault you for your
That's
opinion.
fine.
But
That's
Cliff,
fine.
let me ask you this. I sent you the link to that hateful 10-minute video on YouTube. I sent you a link to other blogs that
Yes.
are using your article to defend a very ugly and divisive opinion on Amazon Lord of the Rings. How do you
Yes.
feel? How do you feel right now of these divisive people taking your words and using it to defend their hateful agenda?
I think it's kind of nonsense, and I won't even acknowledge them. It's beneath me to acknowledge that stuff, really, and it's beneath the conversation that we're having. The conversation we're having is about um, Professor Tolkien's magnificent effect on us as a readership, and what is attractive about that. What is attractive about Tolkien that improves our lives, makes us better people, and keeps us going in this fandom. And it's worth
But how you
examining.
can't ignore the fact that their first video on the topic got 100,000 hits, which is 10 times the amount
Yeah.
this podcast
Hmm.
is. So
Yeah.
their voice has been amplified, and their voice currently is stronger than yours. How do you defend against? How do you engage? You have to engage. You can't just ignore, because minds are being poisoned by this toxicity, and
Well,
you refuse to engage. So you
I didn't.
refuse to clean the public
Well,
diosphere.
no. I'm not in a position of refusing to engage. I'm in a position of not giving oxygen to the fire, which is very wise. There's a great deal of wisdom in taking the air out of the room and taking oxygen out of that conversation. So my opinion is kind of like the way that Tolkien felt when the German publishers were writing him letters, during the war, asking, "Are you of German ancestry? Do you have any Jewish friends? Do you? Huh? Are you a crazy, person that we can?"
They
Uh,
asked Tolkien this.
they asked Tolkien about his position, and he wrote a really curt and professional letter talking about how he was disgusted by the Nazi Party's race doctrine, and he said, "Personally, I don't give a damn about a German translation. It can go hang. If you're going to ask me for paperwork to prove my Aryan ancestry before you guys approve of a German translation," he's like, "I don't care. You can let it go hang in the wind. I don't care." And he actually said in his letter, "I am sorry to say that I don't have, lots and lots of Jewish friends, those wonderful people, and though I should, because they're very creative and very talented." So I'm in the same position, I guess, in a very loose analogy, because I I don't want to give any credit to that level of it. So if other people are trying to rework my position to fit their agenda, I will refute that. I will refute it now and forever. But I'm not going to go talking about it and bitterly decrying it online, because I'm not going to give any oxygen to it. I have politely decided to, um, you know, say the focus is on fans. The focus is not about politicizing the issue. It's about fandom finding their voice. And I'll say it 10 times until I'm red in the face. This is not a politicized conversation about any of that horse pucky. And whoever tries to do that is absurd. This is about the fandom using the shared electronic media for a better goal. Now, instead of all this social media being used in a divisive way, which is not what we're doing, it's supposed to be used in an open-handed, unifying way, so that the studio does not make the mistake of spending $1 billion on ruining the franchise. We want to see them do well. We are the fandom who want to see Amazon Studios do exceptionally well. Once again, my friends, Jennifer Hutchison, JD Payne, everybody, Mr. McKay, Mr. Cogman, if you're all there watching and listening, we want you to do this incredibly well. We wanted Peter Jackson to do really well, and he had the bandwidth to do it, but he engaged with the fandom and he knew what was at stake. In fact, he had a lot of people working on his cast and crew who were hardcore fans, and they kept him in check. You know that.
Right. And so we have to learn.
This is not about politicizing any crap at all. This conversation has always been, and it's the reason why I wrote that article in the first place, is that we can discuss our sensibility. What was the thing I said in the opening statement? Is this really a 4-alarm fire? Is this really something to cause alarm? It depends upon your outlook. It depends upon your temperament. And my temperament is to stick with Tolkien and his idiom. Stick with the idiom of Professor Tolkien, and you're going to do all right. That was my advice to the studio. It is something everybody else believes in. Stick with the professor, and you can't go wrong in making your TV show.
I think
that's what the conversation is. Nothing else comes into it, really.
There's a comment in the chat room from Laswin that says there's a strong element in current society for sensationalism and immediate reactions without checking out for themselves, quite often for some attention and possibly notoriety. Taking the high road and not stooping to that level holds off adding more, and hopefully others will realize that negativity and come along on that higher road too. But let's just track what happened. We posted a rumor that they were extras casting have to be comfortable with nudity. Then they hired an intimacy coordinator. This set off a bunch of red flags. Cliff, you authored the thing, and then comicbook.com posted about it. And then
CBN,
Stephen Colbert did a joke
on
his late night TV show. Stephen Colbert did a joke about it. And now the YouTube fire ecosystem of YouTube, there's videos that are getting hundreds of thousands of views. Just trying to divide everybody and basically a hate watch. And I love Colbert because he did his joke tastefully and wonderfully, and it was funny. And so there's ways to do it, but I want to say, if you're watching Amazon Trailer Park, everybody, it's like, learn from Star Wars for the last 5 years and learn from New Line Cinema. Both of them. Learn from them. And what Star Wars did, what Lucasfilm did with Star Wars, did not work. They did not address the negativity. They took a hands-off approach to all of the discourse, and that just created a void of oxygen that was filled with hate and fire. And Star Wars fandom destroyed itself. And our agenda here, our goal with fandom for the last 20 years, across movies, documentaries, books, articles, everything that we've done in our existence as the OneRing.net has been to bring people together. And Amazon, pay attention, because if this is starting to flare up, and that video over there that is all about hate and sexuality and everything like that is getting 100,000 views, and we're getting 5 or 10,000 views, and it's just they're reaching an audience and the algorithms are promoting it. I'm saying that Amazon, you have to pay attention. You cannot ignore this. And one strategy to do better than Lucasfilm is to reward and encourage the positive voices. And you have to take a stand and say, this voice we trust, even though we don't agree with them, and sometimes we really don't like what they post, but this is an authoritative voice that will treat everybody right. And that's what we're up against. And that's what we're up against politically, and with Star Wars, and with all the fandom. Everyone wants to be divided on everything. Even Harry Potter fandom is just, destroyed over the creator said something, and the whole religious right is now up against the whole liberal left of Harry Potter fandom over one like, everyone wants to divide. That's not what we're about.
No,
and Cliff, this is going to continue happening.
And here's why. We don't own this. We don't own. You know how we look at our fandom? Do you know how? I'm going to tell you guys how we look at Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion. We love it, but we don't own it. We don't control it. It belongs to the literature. It's unique. This is not a fantasy property that came from any video game. It did not come from, a TV show or just a couple of movies from the 70s. Okay? This is a fandom that has a literary, scholarly, and very realistic existence that we can never touch. We cannot touch it. We cannot change it. The power of Tolkien's world building and the careful stewardship of Christopher Tolkien over all those years. And Christopher Tolkien was the linchpin in keeping, controls on how the Tolkien stories were getting used or appropriated for other, other adaptations or other means. So we do not own this. We love it as much as we love it, but you know who owns it? Everybody. Everybody owns it in the books, in the heritage that it really is, and we're never going to change that. And it always comes back to that. And maybe I contradicted myself in just saying that we do not own it, but holistically, we all are the beneficiaries. That's what I meant to say.
Fidelity to Tolkien.
Because we do not own this, therefore we don't have to change it. We do not have to struggle to change it. We don't have to control it. And we're not going to be polarized as a fandom about controlling it. The Star Wars fandom went down the rabbit hole in thinking that they could control something that was now no longer in George's hands, but it was in corporate Disney's hands. And the mentality shifted with Star Wars fandom in that they wanted to control everything about it, and they couldn't. But we don't have that attitude in Tolkien fandom because the books and the literature are sacrosanct. They are perfect, and they will always be there.
And we're willing to go where you want to take us. Yeah, because and the reason I say that, Cliff, with all this hullabaloo over sex and sexuality in this show, which I think I'm excited for. Let's.
Yes. What Instagram post? Did you make that funny?
That's director J.A. Bayona, who's directing the pilot, the first 2 episodes, the pilot of Lord of the Rings, saying he's reached the halfway mark of production for Lord of the Rings. He's only halfway done with the pilot, Cliff. This backs up everything we've been reporting on for the last 5 weeks, that the pilot is nowhere near done. They're still shooting. Like, they're months behind schedule for the series. Like, he's saying that just his part is...
I know, huh? Well, it's a lot. There's a lot going on, and we know that they're very busy, and we want them to succeed at making something amazing because, we don't want them to fail. We do not want them to make something that is, crazy and off, way off the hook like a...
But Cliff, did you notice the small detail in that? Did you notice the tiny detail in the middle of that Instagram post?
But don't read too much into it. He's using those emojis. He used
the wizard emoji. Look.
No, that doesn't mean anything. He was just using the only fantasy Lord of the Rings related emoji that are there.
No, I'm doubling down. There's a wizard in this series, and he's using that emoji to talk to us.
Okay, well, you can double down on that, but that was your Instagram, not mine. I want everybody to know that I didn't post that. And let's go to talk to our fans who are talking with us in the live chat, because we're not going to abuse our privilege anymore and talking about what we're talking about. In terms of, are there going to be blue wizards, and would we find that acceptable? Okay, well, Professor Tolkien wrote them off the stage, and he never included anything about their stories. So, okay, let's say that he put a wizard emoji in there. Well, it doesn't mean anything, but if it did, it did mean something.
Let me ask you this, Cliff. Now that we've gotten all
fired
up
about blue wizards, please, because
now that we've gotten all fired up about,
they want to change the subject now. We want to change the subject.
No. Now that we've gotten all fired up about sex and sexuality and how you don't want any part of it, and I want to see it in the show. If there is a wizard in this series, are you okay with it now, even if it's not book accurate?
No, I don't think it's cool to have characters who are in the third age show up in the second age when they are many, many thousands of years off course.
The blue wizards were in the second age, buddy. The blue
Only
wizards.
In some writings. There are some different writings in the unfinished tales, and remember, these are posthumously published manuscripts that contradict one another. In some of the stories, Professor Tolkien has them appear in the Third Age and disappear way off into the east.
But later in life, closer to the publishing of the Silmarillion, Tolkien says the Blue Wizard showed up in the Second Age.
Professor Tolkien wrote other manuscripts that did not fully reconcile with his earlier story, and he brought them in on the Second Age. However, hey, whatever, you know, if you're going to talk to me at that level, then we need to talk to the ghost of John Ronald, maybe. I mean,
let's just ask the director of Lord of the Rings, J.A. Bayona. Hey, buddy, are there going to be wizards in this show?
I know. Yeah, I know. Okay, Okay, yeah, I saw that. You're just too funny. I'm looking at the chat at the same time I'm looking at the people. I want to acknowledge Daniel and all the good people, Princess Toy Nerd, and the chatters who are there in the live stream with us. I want to acknowledge all of you folks. Thank you for being with us on the show.
Spartan343 says, I don't know if the Unfinished Tales would be considered canonical, though. I will say this. The Unfinished Tales have been licensed by Amazon.
There's Ryan. Hi, I see Ryan in the chat. Okay. Maybe it's a good idea. Let's say hypothetically that there are a couple of blue wizards who are the only ones to appear in some of Tolkien's writings that were not fully reconciled, but okay, they were later, and he wrote them a lot later because he thought maybe they would be better. Okay, fine. If you've got wizards in this TV series, then I'm telling you the only ones that should show up are the blue wizards, Alatar and Palando. Yes, but they went by other names that are in the back of my brain when he wrote that second, those other drafts later on. So, okay, this is cool that, you know, we could have blue wizards. It's awesome, but we better not have Gandalf and Radagast and Saruman, because they definitely did not show up until the Third Age.
So let me be clear: if Gandalf, either Ian McKellen or a young Gandalf, which would be so egregious that even I would get offended, if Gandalf shows up in the pilot, you're checked out for the whole series. I mean,
no, I'm not. Hold on, I don't know if I'm going to be. You know, do you want to talk about what's going to check me out? Okay. No, why don't we focus on the positive and talk about what is going to check the fans in? Okay. I'm cool with the Blue Wizards showing up, and there's lots and lots. There's Andrew. I've got dozens of people that I'm looking at in the live chat, and they're saying, come on, Cliff, get with it, get with it. Tolkien wrote that stuff later on in his essay, the Istari, and it's in Unfinished Tales. We could talk legally for 2 seconds. Does Amazon Studios have the legal access to those stories in the Unfinished Tales?
Yes, they do.
Okay, yes. Okay, so some, not all of it. We don't know how much. Okay, to what degree Amazon has licensed the Unfinished Tales, we're going to find out eventually. But okay, cool. If there's Blue Wizards, excellent. Then cool. I'm down with that. But
should the Blue Wizards in the Second Age be the same age as young Galadriel and young Elrond as have been cast?
No, I think Tolkien said that they showed up as withered old men.
Wizards were never young. None of the wizards were ever young. They were always only old men for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
What oh yeah, there's the names. Thank you. I really appreciate you, Daniel. Morenhatar, and Romestamo. I could remember Romestamo. That was in my brain. But I couldn't remember the other one. So let's get these blue wizards on stage. The problem is that in the stories, Professor Tolkien does not have them operating in the west lands of Middle-earth. You know, near Lindon, near the Grey Havens. They're not hanging around in Arnor or the early stages of settlements that the Númenóreans had on the coast. The blue wizards were not hanging around with Celebrimbor. They were not hanging around during the forging of the Rings of Power. They're not in the story. If the blue wizards are there, they're not involved in the war of the elves and Sauron. After Sauron makes the One Ring and the elven lords take their 3 rings off, immediately take them off, and hide those rings to protect the elven rings. And then Sauron makes war on Eregion, and the doors of Moria are shut, and it's chaos, and it goes on and on. And then eventually Sauron gets taken by the king of Numenor back to Numenor. Well, during all of these wonderful, wonderful stories, the Blue Wizards are not operating in the West regions. So let's speculate and let's run the engine, okay? Green Dragon gossip. Now it's time to gossip and speculate on some very wild rumors, okay? Here's a rumor for you. Let me start a rumor now, all right? If you're going to get 2 Blue Wizards in Middle-earth, then they're going to be taking us in the narrative to other regions, far to the east. We're going to go to the lands of the Far Harid and to further east of Rune, which is just the Elvish word for east. We're going to go to the Orokarni, the Red Mountains, in the furthest east. We're going to go to places that we've never gone. And this is going to be an open debate for how much they're going to
let me ask you this. Would you
write
be
all
okay?
new stories in these eastern lands of Middle-earth.
Would you be okay if the Blue Wizards were twins?
That'd be cool. I don't mind if they're twins. But usually those decisions are made upon the spiritual relationship between the Maiar spirit and who they worked with in Valinor, because the Valar had Maiar spirits who were related to them, and they had working relationships and spiritual relationships between the Maiar and the Valar. So
I think it would be cool. I don't know. I think it would be cool to have Blue Wizards as twins. Let me ask you this: do the Blue Wizards need to be old and white and men?
Hold on a second. I want to respond to Sarah. Yes, we would love to see the east of Middle-earth. We're going to see totally different races of men, different Teleri, dark elves who never made the journey. We're going to see a lot of different locations, and we're going to see where the Numenorians are going around the coast and sailing around and encountering different tribes and different settlements of different regions of the east. I am totally rocking out on that. That is a great deal of anticipation and enthusiasm for me to go and see different geographic areas of Middle-earth and different peoples of Middle-earth. Do you know how hard Morgoth was working to corrupt the hearts of men in the east? Way, way, way before the War of Wrath, before he was taken prisoner
so we
by
can
the Valar.
explore that. But the Wizards, stay on the Wizards. Do the Wizards need to be old white men?
I'm leading up to the 2 wizards. That is the location where they went to be a counteraction to counteract the spiritual and political malfeasance of Morgoth that had been operating there centuries and centuries before Sauron took up residence in Mordor. We're talking into the way back when. So it is connected, and it's useful. I think it's useful lore for the writers of the show to put their Blue Wizards out on the job, the same job that Tolkien did. If Professor Tolkien said, you wizards have a job, and your job is to go out there and help secure the hearts of men and help them in the fight against Morgoth's influence, then the writers of the show should stick with Tolkien and use that as a motivator for why the wizards are out there in those regions of the East. I'm just saying,
So you're not answering the question. You're stonewalling like you're in front of Congress right now.
What?
The question is simple. Do the Blue Wizards need to be old white men?
No, they don't need to be old white men. They just need to be old, weathered, and they need to hide their power. The idea for them to appear old and, aged and to not look like they had much, personal power was because they were not supposed to exert direct personal spiritual power. They were supposed to influence the hearts of men while they were in that old man disguise. It's something that Tolkien pulled out of the back pages of mythology from, ancient Nordic legends where, the gods would show up at your house dressed as an old beggar, and, it was a judgment upon mankind, whether you were nice to the beggar and let them in and shared your food with them, or whether you gave them the bum's rush and, slammed the door in their face. The idea is that these powerful angelic beings were not white men, but that they were old men. That is the important part. That
Let me ask you this.
They had the presence of being less powerful than they really were. And there was a metaphysical point to that.
So, if you're okay, so if it's true to Tolkien, because you're all about fidelity to Tolkien, if you're okay with pursuing these as twins, maybe pursuing people of color, old people of color, they just have to be old. Let me ask you this: Tolkien never wrote them apart. The Blue Wizards were always together. Let me ask you this: in the year 2020, would you have any serious issues with the Blue Wizards' implied companionship?
Who cares? But who cares beyond, does it serve Tolkien's purpose in storytelling? You're talking about a 2020 style relationship when Professor Tolkien was not writing relationships at that time. So what's the point? What is the overall point?
So Tolkien specifically did not write all the details because he wanted other minds to create in this world. He just wanted to create the foundation and the pillars. Mm-hmm. And the Blue Wizards obviously fit into that. He's created a couple characters. He never fully explored it, but he anticipated other people would. Would it be true to Tolkien, even as a Catholic writer, if the Blue Wizards were written in this show as companions?
This is a hypothetical that I see no wisdom in exploring. I see no wisdom in exploring this hypothetical at all, because that's just going to trigger people and start the negative rage machine going. So how about I'd rather defer to Professor Tolkien had no interest in writing about and developing interpersonal relationships between the Istari. That was not what they were written for. They were written to have interpersonal relationships with the kings of men, with the rulers of the elf kingdoms, with the dwarf lords. The relationships that he wrote about were about how they could motivate as a corrective, as a spiritual corrective to the influence of the Dark Lord Morgoth and later on his lieutenant Sauron. So no, there isn't anything about here's
the thing. Going back to Tolkien, and I think we will continue to reinforce it like this, and I think this is the right method of discussion, is that being true to Tolkien was so specific and wrote so many letters and notes and volumes of stuff that his son Christopher spent an entire career publishing the unpublished notes. If Tolkien specifically wrote things specifically, and Tolkien specifically did not write things specific, the act of not writing down the details was as specific as writing down the details. So I think Tolkien was intelligent and smart enough to know that these stories would be pursued by his son, by other filmmakers, by other creatives. So he creates an opening for exploration. And I think there's a comment in the chat room that I want to throw at you. Where's it at?
Okay. Well, I'd like to.
If Mr. Tolkien had written about the Blue Wizards, Jocelyn Carter says, if Mr. Tolkien had written about the Blue Wizards, they probably would have been people of color, because they would have to blend in to the area of the world that they inhabited, and he was sharp like that. And if you're saying that the Blue Wizards went east and we're exploring the lands of Harad and the eastern area, those are people that aren't gonna look like Rohan and Gondor, right? So
right, yeah, they're completely different.
So that it's true to Tolkien. It's absolutely true to Tolkien, and fidelity to Tolkien, that these wizards could be people of color, should be people of color, but it's Amazon's choice because Amazon has creative control, and the Tolkien estate is looking out for everything, and the Tolkien estate has veto rights on major story points.
Well, tell you what, the Professor Tolkien's story did not go into certain areas. His storytelling went into a lot of other areas, and this is the point of scholarship. It is the overall point of scholarship to explore the themes, the powerful themes, and the world building, and most of all the languages, because this was a linguistic pursuit. For Professor Tolkien, this was not a pursuit of let's explore interpersonal relationships that are changing now that the 19th century is coming to an end. He was not anticipating that. Professor Tolkien wasn't even in that wave, that brainwave. So that's why I'd rather focus on.
Moving on from that, people are
moving on from that. Yes,
people in the chat room are picking up on kind of what's happening here, and I just want to reinforce what we talked about through the majority of the show, is that these conversations are going to happen in fandom, and we as the One Ring and as a community should not and cannot ignore them like a lot of Star Wars groups did. Like, we have to be prepared to not give them oxygen, but to reposition the conversation so the air is not taken over with the toxicity. And Cliff, I think you've done a great job of taking these very flashpoint topics of just only about the Blue Wizards, and totally like, hey, you want to go here, but we're right here. Tolkien's right here. He's not over here. Tolkien's right here. Stay here. And if I want to keep going over here, you're like, no, come back. This is Tolkien. He's right here.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to say thank you. Good night, Sarah. I'm watching everyone in the chat who says good night. We're getting near the end of our show, and yes, there's a lot of room for everybody to come into this discussion, as long as we understand what there's not a lot of wild conjecture that you can slap at Professor Tolkien, because it won't stick. The more extreme you try to go with weird connections of Tolkien supported German attitudes, and the dwarves represented the greed of capitalists of the West, and the dragon represented the righteous German ethno-state. You know what? Just like it was back then in the 1930s and 40s, it's just as silly to try to, push all that kind of stuff into the arena of conversation, because we know the books are there, and especially Tolkien's letters, his published letters, are the most revealing. And his conversations with his publisher, with his family, and with the other professional writers in the Inklings, who were his close friends. And there's even interviews. There's interviews with Tolkien that exist with very clever people who are smarter than I am, talking with the professor while he was alive. We have a body of work that represents the true Tolkien essence. It is there. And I think it's kind of inviolable. That's the word I'm looking for. The true essence of what Tolkien built with his world, his legendarium, and all of his unpublished works. When it all comes together, academically and linguistically, you get something that is so strong, it is inviolable. So you can't get away with slapping a bunch of, year 2021 stuff at it. It might not always work, but there's bandwidth. Like, he was smart enough to leave. He said that in his published letter 131 that I mentioned a lot in my article. He said that there's some stories that are sketched in very specific novelistic detail, and other sketched stories are briefly sketched, and they're kept off to the side. And that is where there's breathable room. There's a lot of breathability within the world, but there's still an inviolate set of narrative and history, languages, and rules of that world that are, stuff you can't mess with. So it sounds like an oxymoron, but there's room to breathe and there's room to build in the world of Arda, but you cannot play fast and loose with it too much because, if you play fast and loose with it, it's going to smell bad, it's going to look artificial, and it's not going to have the fidelity to Tolkien that you want. So,
look, and a lot of not a lot of people, but some people are going to loudly claim, that they don't want Tolkien's new show, all go all woke and all social justice warrior, and including people and places that don't need to be there. They just want to put them in there to make this as accessible as possible. But I think Nicholas in the chat rooms says something really nice. He says, "True inclusion, when and if possible, while respecting Tolkien in every inch of the path, is the way." And I think that goes to what we've all what you've been saying for 20 years. True inclusion, when and if possible, while respecting Tolkien, is in every inch of the path is the way. And I will say this, Cliff, you just said what I was going to say, which is, unlike Star Wars and unlike Harry Potter and unlike all these other franchises, it's such a dirty word, franchises, is that we actually have Tolkien himself on video, on audio, in letters. We have a complete picture of Tolkien on record, on tape, saying exactly what to do and how to approach these things. Because in the 1930s, Nazi Germany was the second biggest market for his books. And Tolkien, we have letters of how Tolkien addressed some of these, when a controversial group wants to attach controversial statements to his work. So Tolkien has given us a game plan, and Amazon, you'd be wise to license the letters to Tolkien. Amazon, pay attention to what Tolkien said, because we are, and we're going by the letter 131 and all the hundreds of letters. Tolkien told us how to deal with trolls and the alt-right and all of the. Tolkien taught us. He gave us a game plan. He said, this is how I feel about the subject. Here's the elements that I expect people to expand on. Here's the elements that you cannot touch. I've written in stone. And we have a game plan. And we know what Tolkien would accept and not accept. And we're just going to move forward. And we're not going to destroy ourselves like Star Wars fandom did.
Indeed. Intriguing concepts. And I have to say thank you to all of the people who are participating in our chat with us and being, thanks Fausto. Thank you, Zathras, and everyone's been so kind. There's a lot to discuss, and I'm really glad that we're getting a jump start and we're talking about it now, because Amazon Studios has left us alone, abandoned, literally abandoned on the radio waves and on the airwaves for over 3 years now. So we are left to, suss out whatever we can suss out. And we're here to, spread the good word that, we love speculating. We love speculating about what's going on, and we want it to be good. We do not want it to be some pastiche show of Game of Thrones with the Witcher, with Riverdale, with Stranger Things. We don't want just a pastiche Netflix show. This is supposed to be like a $1 billion franchise, which is taking up the stewardship of mass media representation of Tolkien. And because we're left in the dark, we're going to do what we do anyways. We're going to take spy reports on the side. We'll take information on the side that gets secretly whispered to us by all of our contacts out in the world. And we're going to do the reporting that we do. And until somebody comes to the table to do an interview with us and say, hey, this is the Middle Earth that we're working on, then we're going to continue doing what we do. And hopefully, we're all aware of what makes Professor Tolkien's books so special to us that we even want to have this conversation in the first place. We don't want a careless job done in how the TV show is made. That's all. It's really that simple.
There's a few regulars in our chat room that are saying this, and we've seen some tweets. This does not represent all of fandom, but someone in the chat room says, "Get woke, go broke," and I just want to say, I think you need to go reread Tolkien, because Tolkien is the most woke of all fantasy authors. You just need to go back and reread the books, man, because if you don't think Tolkien's woke, I don't know, like you're missing it, and I think Tolkien would tell you that. Cliff, I wanted to tell you one more thing. Amazon has hired another person from the Hobbit production.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, intriguing.
Christina Patterson is a regular contributor to Weta Workshop and the makeup department, the Oscar-winning makeup department of Weta Workshop. Christina Patterson has been hired on Lord of the Rings. She is the contact lens painter. Her whole job, her entire career, is painting contact lenses.
Wow.
And now she's working on Amazon's Lord of the Rings. She's painting contact lenses. And so she's been on she's been on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies and TV shows. Everything from The Hobbit to The Mandalorian to The Walking Dead to Nosferatu. She was on Picard. She was on Preacher, Legion, Swamp Thing, Good Omens, The Tick, Hellboy, Gotham, Nightfall, Aquaman. She is the #1 contact lens painter in the world for every major prestige production, and now she is doing the contact lenses. So basically, all eyes on Christina. All eyes on Christina.
You're making a joke there?
Patterson.
All eyes on Christina. Okay. You're making a contact lens joke. Okay. Fine. Okay. Wow. Well, more people from Weta Workshop is cool, but we need to remind everyone that they're working on, there's Christina Patterson. She is working on contact lenses with Weta Workshop for maybe some scary creatures or some orcs or trolls or something more serious and scary. Like,
look, every little ounce of Weta Workshop that's involved in this show makes me happy. And Josh in the chat room says the more Weta involved makes me feel better. I think every fan in the world agrees. The more Weta Workshop involved, everyone feels better. And Cliff, as we wrap up, one more Green Dragon gossip. If you enjoyed The Mandalorian, you're really going to enjoy this show. Rumor has it that they built a totally digital LED wall set in New Zealand, just like they built for The Mandalorian here in California. And they are shooting Lord of the Rings rather than not just on green screen. They are shooting scenes of Lord of the Rings on a giant digital LED wall, just like The Mandalorian. There are videos on YouTube making of Mandalorian where they show this technology. It's crazy. It is better than virtual reality.
You can actually watch an episode of The Mandalorian Gallery, which is the behind-the-scenes episodic series on Disney Plus, where they go into great physical detail about the digital wall technology on The Mandalorian. So,
and the cool thing about this is that all of the armor, the shiny helmets, now can reflect whatever digital things they're going to add live on set. And people from ILM are currently in New Zealand, and that is what part of J.A. Bayona's next round of filmmaking. Again, he just confirmed that they're halfway through filming the pilot episode. J.A. Bayona just confirmed yesterday they're halfway through the pilot, so that means they're halfway through one of 2 episodes. and they've got a digital set, and more Weta people are involved. We'll have more to talk about in the coming weeks on this. Also, we have more details on the 4K Blu-ray release, including a special edition that comes with the One Ring of Power, a steelbook edition with the first ever case made of steel, and we've got so much more. We're going to try to get Bill Hunt from the Digital Bits on. Maybe we can get some 4K footage from Warner Brothers. Maybe our friends at Warner Brothers can send us over some beautiful 4K footage so you all can see. So we're working on a bunch of stuff to keep you entertained and keep you informed. And in the meantime, we're going to keep reporting on every single little rumor, and we're going to analyze everything to death, because that's what fans do. But what we will not is devolve into toxicity. And if we see the headwinds of negativity and toxicity start entering into the discussion, we're going to make you aware of it. We're going to make you aware of how to see it. And we're not going to elevate it, but we are going to call it out and say, no, we're not going there.
And hopefully we will also not just say we're going to call it out and help people get, away from it. We're going to diffuse it. We're going to diffuse it with what we do best. This is what we do best as Tolkien fans. We have intelligent, really thoughtful conversation. You know what? My political stripes don't match with, lots and lots of people out there, and some of their political stripes don't necessarily match with me. And who cares anyways? Who gives a damn? What we really care about is how good Tolkien's stories are. We really care about that. We care about how good his books are and how his legacy should not be, screwed up. So there you go. That's what we care about.
Cliff, this has been a wonderful conversation. And again, sometimes we have to have a difficult conversation. And I know we don't agree on a lot of things, but I think we can agree on
that's okay.
the rules of the debate. And I think we can respect the rules of debate.
Yes.
And I think that's what we've done for 20 years. Let me remind you, one of our senior editors of the OneRing.net in 2002 walked out of the theater of Two Towers. He was so disgusted with what Peter Jackson had done with Faramir, and he was so disgusted that Samwise was given a speech at Osgiliath. Hobbits were never at Osgiliath in the books. So we've always had these discussions. We've always had these debates of what's true to Tolkien, what makes good filmmaking, and where can filmmakers explore, right? And it turns out Tolkien was also dealing with this when the Nazis wanted Tolkien to prove his Jewish ancestry before they released the book in Germany. So we have a game plan. Tolkien taught us how to deal with this while still having informed debate. And Cliff, I think your article did very well. I don't agree with all of your conclusions in the article, but I think we're going to have more opinions posting in the next week or so.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Thank you, Natalie. There's Natalie. Everybody's being so kind. You guys are really awesome. Yeah, you know what? I still like bitching about Faramir, because Faramir would have never taken Frodo and Sam and Gollum prisoner all the way to Osgiliath.
By the way,
makes me angry.
Michael Burns reminds me, thank you, Michael, for showing up in the chat room. Hey, Cliff, do you remember that weirdly priced $800 Blu-ray set for The Lord of the Rings?
The one that was just reduced to $100?
It's now $100. So if you don't have a 4K TV and you don't have a 4K player, $100 for that $800 set with the book and the nice book and everything like that. Like,
very nice.
That's a really nice thing. Go to Amazon.com, search for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and the $800 thing is now $100. And we'll have more information on the 4K release, including what is coming on each of the packages, what versions of the movie, what behind the scenes, and what you need to play it, because not all Blu-ray is made the same. You really need a 4K thing. So we're going to have a full 4K discussion in the coming weeks. Cliff, thank you. Thank you for having this tough conversation. Thank you for not allowing me to go too far right, too far left, and bringing us back to Tolkien all the time.
Do you know what I want to do with you, Justin? I want to sit down with you and I want to read Tolkien's letters together You and I need to have a reading session so that you can be up to speed. That's what I want. That's what I really want. I want to bring you up to that level. I want to bring you there, buddy. Okay, yeah, see, that's right, Ryan. You're correct, Ryan. It's a bargain, and waiting has paid off. Okay, good night, Andrew, Robin, Tammy, Dave Gentry. Good night, all the fans in the chat. Good night, Spartan, Pipsky. I love you, Pipsky. There's Iravandi. There's Josh Long. There's Michael. There's, oh my God, Pate. Look out, it's Fausto, Natalie. Everybody's in there. The whole world is in here chatting with us. And thanks for coming to join us on a Tuesday. Guess what? Next week, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to do it all again. A live stream on Torn Tuesday here at theonering.net. Get it? Torn, the One Ring net? Okay, you got it. Anyways, his name is Justin Sewell. My name is Clifford Broadway. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at QuickBeam2000. And we're going to have many more opinions and counterpoint opinion pieces that will go up against my sex and sensibility column, so we can have a wide mosaic of interesting voices onto the OneRing.net. Thank you for being with us, and we will join you next week again, ladies and gentlemen. Until then, be safe, be careful. Buenas noches y buena suerte. We'll see you next time.